Good morning, afternoon, evening, folks of the world, I think. Uh, Welcome to Sunday Go to Meeting Belated, which means Monday Sunday Go to Belated. We already went, but some of you are late. So, we want to provide the option to sit in community once again on the worst day possible for any group of people. That's it. That's all. That's all. Intros. Thank the funders. I don't know what the funders are. No, the Department of Labor, New York State. Thank you. For unemployment, however long this is going to last, which is probably 3 weeks now. Three more. What am I doing to prepare for that? I don't know. And it's part of the... Okay, let's do it.
Welcome to Sunday Go-To Meeting, where we press this button which produces a random faith, active or extinct, always real or eternally fictional, grandiose or petty as fuck. And once the faith is randomly determined, we will listen to the homily of the week from the pastoral agent of that particular faith, and we will employ discernment on its message to extract what relevance and value it has for our lives. Now quick, we're a little late. It's almost 10 p.m. Who wants to be at church this late? Come on! Quick! Press the button! You press the button, which flickers and F-whipples and Gatham on the screen is the random faith of the week. Emirisa, for your consideration, this obscure religion began in Norway in about 1200 C maybe, and some early devotees liked fish soup very much indeed, but most disliked salt pork, even more they didn't call their theology the pathless path. They just wanted four sons. Also, there was apparently no gold-edged cold Harald's plummeted here until around 1720 when Olaf Tryggvason pushed into Scotland looking for trouble he could fight somebody over, so his nickname might change before settling back home with beer and another name everyone pronounced like this Tryggvason, whatever that means. The head guy you asked me to check out because the fan base reminds us a bit too much of science fiction fans were people called Einar Sigurdsson Kettle Bjornsson, who hailed mostly from Snefrickstadir down in Akron's town, sleepless kind of territory by way of Alfheimer. If I have this right, I did my usual scoping round online, and turns out old hairy Viking faces are showing up now everywhere all over Iceland thanks to Disney's runaway hit series Islandinga Songa that we thought had only gone viral through Instagram. And any numbers you think one family's reenactments do any damage? They're selling an entirely different script. Well, actually, I haven't watched anything outside those opening minutes of Prentipede lately because BDSM erotica kills everything funny. After seeing Candace Key's double enigmatic video get slash voted hotter than God knows how many kinky clips full of smutty chicks named Dolly. Anyways, someone managed to point out the Siggy costume belonged to this new performance, true doing revivals of Island Ingasonga stage shows, which explain the way recent references made to Gungnir missiles blasting from volcanic peaks, launching evil slaves fleeing Northlands overseas, where dark almighty machines may repair them upon receiving ether cores gleaned across Norseland by outlaw slave bands operating under egregious rebel names, say such as Ulfid Norgrim. Those several plot inconsistencies must mean something other than cold northern windstorms making space elevator cables fall apart causing enemy battle cruisers falling onto skyscraper roof parks going boom causing yet other satellites getting cut loose. Oops, but lost on the line again here. See if I can stay awake while transcribing later tonight, cause being off sugar is not working. Weird shit I don't know. Why isn't anyone telling me? There. Let me go stick needles into every fingertip 3 times before writing again shall make certain I am 100% awake to focus. Oh dear God, okay. Time lapse pic deleted. Thanks. YouTube superpowers. Maybe tomorrow night, but hopefully gonna be first time having seen Vader use these exact words since yesterday, except switch sex as well. Hey gays, take heart. Yes, ha ha ha. Asterisk. Shot asterisk cup. Inducting them seems easier. The wonder if some kind soul can look forward into my future timeline and inform me who thinks to upload these. Yeah, cool. Love you, bud. At last, when peeking elsewhere around Tumblr universe, hoping to learn details of young pardoned ladies turning violent today, and ended up tracking the misleadingly charming young lesbian icon Ussie over to the country's LGBT community, trying to find more ways of sabotaging things unapproved by manufacturers. Noted mentionable threats included cancellation of R/C playthings expected sometime next year, or failing that suddenly recalling previous toys distributed prior to a price rise a year ago when imported European ones took hold, running longer battery life, including noise dampening sound absorbing parts during crashes. You listening, Earth government officials? She wants the latter. Anything further on GB Hi-Fi discount doorbusters? Don't joke at that. Was never taken seriously anyway. Come clean. Keep fucking kidding yourself. Human children prefer imaginative violence instead of playing with crap built strictly according to spec preordained function formulates, etc. Yawning wake up shitstorm imminent, a hub breakthrough. I've confirmed we're sharing universe now. And obviously changing things radically. Haha, true friends, I won't give details. Sorry, should have said self-abuse jokes. Better just stare directly into camera light. So powerful, it's visible, clear, skin dripping, white flesh, marbling, meltdown, flailing, nastiness masked with mirthful laughter, rickrolling song meme. Even older users notice. Fact said jingle debuted well over half-decade early, worldwide chart success. Mind post internet right, so clueless younger user fails miserably. Discover real original source when spring universal popularity. Band-Aid/Sane in Sahara Desert. Land sea war ravaged ruins. No chalet clubhouse safe house. Just two American men acting on pure instinct, taking risk, chasing rainbows westward and in days. Pandering fortune on nights of debauchery, replete with bad music and uninvited guests, all manner of other sordid activities, apparently before becoming known for mummy porn. Only reason anyone ever cared enough to make an art of it. Really? Before someone finally gave us their own backstory and then decided to erase all record of her existence. Well, there's a lesson to be learned here. Just because you think you're hiding something doesn't mean you are. Someone might stumble across this and learn how wrong you were. Oh God, it's been a long time since you did any science. That was a quick one. Thankfully, not too much longer after the previous. Let's see what the Emirists have cooked up. Empirism is the oldest living religion. Begins the homilist, who turns out to be Siggy, the guy we saw last week, or the newest, if you will. This must be part of his ongoing effort to distance himself from accusations that he is somehow trying to resuscitate or revive some old pagan faith which had faded into obscurity centuries ago. I get that. He can't very well say they weren't around when Christianity came along, but now that everything is coming back again, from Norse mythology being popularized by Disney movies, right through to the recent return of pre-Christian customs in various parts of Europe, including here in Australia, where our government recently allowed people to register ancient Germanic gods like Wotan, Thor, Freya, Tyr, and Thor as official trademarks for use in trade names and copyrights. He has every reason to keep saying things about having lived for over a millennium and to take credit for whatever good ideas happen to show up during those millennia. Whenever he gets asked why he isn't just declaring victory over the church instead of running a parallel system of belief with its own priests and sacred sites and so on. That would be a bit obvious, wouldn't it? Not only does it sound absurd, it also opens him up to all kinds of criticism about making light of other religions and their followers, and maybe even their adherents. Like all the other big faiths, Empirism wants the world to know they aren't going anywhere until everyone else gives up first. But how do you win against the church without turning them into the winners? It's hard to imagine anyone who was raised in modern Western society accepting such an argument at face value, and I'm sure there are plenty who will try to use the Bible's claims to authority as ammunition against any kind of faith which pretends it doesn't need any more than what it already does. The new religion of Emirism has a long history of providing cover stories which claim they have existed forever but were somehow forgotten by the rest of the world. They don't deny this outright, but they make no great effort to prove it either. It might be true that the majority of people have been unaware of their existence these last couple of 100 years, though it seems strange that none of them should have found out before now or discovered some trace evidence to suggest it might be possible. But if I remember right, many Christians still seem to believe in the Great Pumpkin, and apparently God sometimes lets his angels walk among us, so maybe we shouldn't take too much notice when one bunch of mystics tells us another group has always had the truth all along. What could we possibly do with the information anyway, except get mad and fight? If you think we're dealing with people who are likely to let go of something they can't ever use again, just because they got a few details wrong, well, good luck getting your religious doctrine through the peer review process. I mean, look at the Catholics. In 1542, they realized they fucked up their calculations for determining the day of Easter. So they fixed the problem and called it the Pope's Day. But nobody really believed them for hundreds of years afterwards, even though every time you turned around, someone was calling themselves the Catholic Church. Then came Darwin's theory of evolution, and everything went completely sideways. There was an abrupt reevaluation of Christian teachings about how life began. It didn't happen over billions of years in response to random genetic mutations and a shift towards seeing our species as a single branch on a long line of development from lower animals, rather than being given a special place above them in God's scheme of things as it had been understood in the West since the Middle Ages. And the first person to realize what was happening was not some brilliant scientist, but a lowly parish priest named Alfred Russel Wallace, who then took all the credit for himself after his friend Charles Darwin finally finished his magnum opus on the origin of species by natural selection, based upon facts published in 1859, and which proved he couldn't have done it without Wallace's help. People still have trouble believing that there could be any difference between a scientific fact and its public understanding. We're so used to assuming that people understand whatever we tell them that we have trouble grasping that sometimes people will go against their own interests just because we said they should. And this is only a mild example. There are far more serious ones. Not only does the world continue to insist upon trying to treat religious faith as though it was somehow less real or less important than facts, religious belief itself continues to demand proof of reality. As the skeptic Michael Shermer once remarked, people believe absurdities because they need to believe something, whether it makes sense or not. They want us to prove religion isn't true. But why don't they ask us to show them how science can ever lead us to such preposterous ideas as flying whales? I think it would be quite difficult to answer these questions in a way which wouldn't make me sound like an asshole, especially when most scientists who try are actually considered assholes. You see, there's an unspoken assumption at work here. Many people seem to assume that the only kind of truth is one that has been verified through the scientific method. If someone says they're going out to dinner tonight and then gets eaten by a giant mutant spider instead, well, they might claim not to know what happened, but everyone else is expected to shrug and say, well, you shouldn't have made that bet. And if you tried to explain how you weren't betting on spiders, but on having a nice meal with your friends, as long as nobody tried to eat anyone else, then all you'll get back in reply is blank stares and hostile glares from people who think they've already proven that everything in life must be quantifiable. And as soon as we stop talking about actual evidence and start getting into hypotheticals and logical fallacies, people's eyes tend to glaze over, which is unfortunate because there are some good arguments for why it's better to rely upon a theory which is falsifiable rather than one which isn't. What do you mean? That's just a tautology. Well, it seems clear to me that this statement doesn't actually contain any new information, nor does it suggest any interesting conclusions. It rains, therefore water exists. But all ravens are black is something I could repeat until the end of time without running out of material. The former tells us nothing more than the latter does, and in fact the reverse may well be true. Yet I bet money that there are plenty of people who believe the second sentence contains profound insights which couldn't possibly be contained in the first. We can certainly conceive of things which aren't necessarily true but might be true, such as that God loves us or that he doesn't love us but will forgive our sins or whatever. So maybe these theories are even easier to test than ones involving direct observations of nature, and yet they seem to persist when others collapse at the slightest breath of scrutiny. That's a very troubling thought, given how much depends upon them. Let's not digress further into such deep waters right now. The homilist goes on like this for a while longer before moving on to describe how Empirism was founded by one Serge himself. I'm assuming his real name is Siggy, since no one else here has one that begins with an S, who apparently had visions telling him that mankind would one day become slaves under a dark lord called Skadi, who wanted only to rule over her own subjects and a dominion over all creatures. When he found out who she was, however, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry, because he'd been told so long ago who'd destroy humanity. And after meeting her in person, it seemed to make perfect sense. Everyone in existence, from the lowest animal to the highest. God could see what kind of person Skadi really was. He asked why God allowed such evil beings in the world, whereupon he received the revelation which convinced him that we were being tested. This led him to build up his church around 3 pillars: that we should repent from our wicked ways and return to living according to God's wishes, that we must never worship idols, that anyone who attempted to enslave their fellow man deserved nothing less than death, and that we could save ourselves by worshipping Searcher instead, whom we could pray directly for salvation. At this point, I start wondering if perhaps I've fallen asleep, and this is some bizarre dream brought about by a concussion, because I'm pretty sure the last thing I remember is waking up on a cold stone slab inside a warehouse. But there are quite a few people nodding off as well now, so maybe they're having similar problems. And as I think about how there's not actually any solid evidence of my current situation except the words of these lunatics who are probably as insane as I am, maybe it's not so strange that I find myself considering this all might be part of someone else's fantasy, rather than reality itself. That would be fine. It might explain why things feel slightly more surreal than usual, but then I look around me again and realize that while I do seem to recognize many of the people present, mostly due to noticing the little triangular badges, there are several others here who don't belong here at all. They just got lost or wandered in somehow. Investigate the sacrament and find it to be ambient. Oh, right. Another one of those pills which can induce a vivid hallucination if taken in large enough doses, but otherwise of no discernible effect whatsoever. If only I'd thought to take one before entering the building. But no, I'd have had no idea what was going on back then, because everything had already started by that time. So this has been an entirely conscious experience up until now. Whatever happened when I fell unconscious is clearly being played out against the backdrop of my imagination, perhaps even with elements added by me, but since it isn't occurring in the real world, I don't need to worry about any harm coming from it. This must have happened during my previous life. After all, not that anyone ever told me anything about reincarnation. Mind you, so I doubt there's much risk in dreaming about something like this, especially if, as seems likely, nothing actually happens here, and I'm simply reading into the event based upon the limited information available to me at present. which means I'm wasting valuable time wondering whether or not a bunch of crazy people might really have kidnapped me and brought me here for their own nefarious purposes, rather than merely enjoying a late night chat amongst themselves. But who are these other people? They aren't wearing triangular badges either. Some of them look familiar and some don't. Maybe some of them are friends who decided to drop in and see what we were doing. That would be nice. It could explain why there seemed to be fewer members of the congregation tonight than there did last week. I suppose they're all too busy spending the evening hanging around outside in the parking lot where nobody can hear. Wait until next week's service, then attend the service again, this time with enough ambient for an actual experience. If it's true, I can go home tomorrow morning feeling pretty pleased with myself, knowing that I accomplished more than I thought possible that day, without having sacrificed any more time than was absolutely necessary. And I can spend the rest of the week resting up before getting back to work on Monday night. What could possibly be wrong with such a sensible plan? The answer is simple: nothing at all. Not only do I have no idea if it will actually make me happy, but even if it does, what difference will it make? Why should I want to sacrifice even a few seconds of my life, the very essence of my existence, in order to add something positive to my life which I already enjoy anyway, and won't miss if it disappears forever in 5 days' time? Forget that you took a dose and take your first dose of Ambien. I'll let you in on another secret about the Church of Amirism. When you get older, you start thinking about things like this. It's easy for people who are younger than me, i.e., most people, to think that their future happiness is dependent upon whatever experiences they might like to pursue or avoid during their current lives. But those who are old enough to have learned how difficult it is to influence their own fate realize just how much control they really have over their own destinies, especially now that they have far less free time available to them than they had 20 years ago. They understand that the choice of whether or not they continue to be unhappy depends almost entirely upon themselves, and that there isn't anything anyone else can do to help them find some kind of happiness which they haven't already found within themselves. Even though this may sound strange coming from someone whose whole life revolves around trying to please others by creating new content which pleases them in return, what makes it true is that I've realized this true so often throughout my career as a game designer, a job where it's quite common for us to deal with customers who expect certain products, but then complain loudly when we don't deliver precisely according to their specifications, that it no longer surprises me anymore. You cannot depend on other people to make your life better. If something happens to them, then of course you're likely to feel miserable, but if nothing bad ever happens to them at all, and yet you still go on being unhappy, then something must be wrong with the way you think. And if you really do know exactly what's wrong with you and how you should be living, and nevertheless remain unhappy, well, then it's time you started considering taking your own advice. Try to forget that you took a dose. This is probably going to be the most difficult part to accomplish. I'm sure I'd rather be able to sleep right now than try to stop thinking about this. But since I need to actually get to bed tonight, that means I'll have to choose one of these three options instead. Accept the fact that this has happened, decide it's harmless enough not to worry about it too much, and spend the rest of the night watching videos online or reading books until I pass out anyway. Or decide that it would be more fun to experience everything in its entirety or almost once before I die and for eternity thereafter than to merely imagine what it might be like. But knowing how easily things like this can change over time due to various factors such as age and gender and drug intake or lack thereof, and that there's absolutely no guarantee that even the memory of this event will persist indefinitely, therefore perhaps there's a risk involved here, which is far greater than uncomfortable. Or lastly, because I am who I am, take the plunge into self-analysis mode by trying to figure out which option is best. The second choice is appealing because it promises an answer which feels intuitively correct. After all, if you want something done properly, then you shouldn't keep putting it off. That's why I always tried my damnedest to finish games quickly and put them on sale. Because if they didn't sell well, then my company wouldn't be able to afford to develop the next game in the series, and everyone at the studio would be looking for another job. But now I realize that I've been using this reason as an excuse not only to give up, but also to hide the truth from myself, so that I could go through life with a vague sense of contentment rather than having to face the reality of how very little I have to offer the world. The problem is that most people don't live their lives under any sort of pressure to do anything, let alone work hard at fulfilling the dreams of other people. So when we tell ourselves these excuses, we often end up believing them. This has been going on for years and has allowed me to make use of my talents in order to earn enough money to fund my hobbies while keeping those hobbies in check. And it's worked fine as long as nobody had to know about it. But what happens now? What should I be doing with the rest of my life instead of this? I can't say that I ever thought about it before because it was too depressing, and I certainly never knew that I'd be able to enjoy life much more by spending less time working and more time playing. Use your ambient dose immediately before you forget you took one. The third option is tempting but problematic. After all, there are two different types of reality. One is based upon sensory data, everything which occurs within our five senses or is derived from them. It's obviously quite a small part of the whole picture. But unfortunately, it's the only part which most of us think of as real in the first place. That means that even if something doesn't actually happen, i.e., it's not occurring in the same universe as the one we inhabit, then even if we know it's happening somewhere else, we'll still be fooled into thinking that it does indeed exist in this reality due to some sort of spooky action at a distance which cannot be detected directly but nevertheless affects our own perceptions without fail. This is why a man standing behind you in line at Starbucks won't affect your day-to-day happiness at all, but a woman walking past with perfect skin and no clothes on will definitely have an effect. The second type of reality, on the other hand, isn't affected by any such laws. It's just a matter of pure faith. If I decide that this is true and make it so, then it's true no matter what other people believe about the situation, nor how much evidence they may produce to support their beliefs. And once I've decided that this particular experience has happened, it will always be right there inside my mind whenever I choose to return to this world again, whether through conscious effort or otherwise. This leaves me feeling rather conflicted. On the one hand, I could simply ignore all of these experiences, perhaps even convince myself that none of them ever occurred, and go back to watching movies all night. But since this would mean losing out on the chance for something far more interesting than a movie ever offered up to me, perhaps that wouldn't be so bad after all. Especially if it might turn out to be fun, and who knows, it could lead to new insights about my life and others' lives, allowing me to change the way that I act in the future in ways which are more constructive than those which I already use today. That would certainly be worth the price of admission. Of course, it's possible that nothing much is going to happen. But even if that turns out to be the case, it won't hurt to take a risk here or there in hopes of something good happening. Go home now. Get some sleep. Tomorrow morning, get another ambient dose. Try to forget all about this nonsense. I should probably check the Ambien website in order to see if the manufacturer offers any advice on situations like this, because that seems like it would make things a whole Lot easier if only I can find the link. Ah, yes. Ambient.com. There's plenty of useful information on that page, including a list of potential side effects. But sadly, it doesn't appear that I'm experiencing any such problems at the moment, or at least not yet anyway. So you're saying that your entire family died last night? Yes, said Professor Oakes. They were killed by a car. The three police officers looked stunned. This was clearly an unusual crime for their small town, where most murders involved husbands killing wives or vice versa. What exactly happened to them? Asked Officer Swanson, looking to his colleague for guidance, since this sort of thing wasn't supposed to happen here. Or anywhere else. Come to think of it, he had been taught during his training how to respond in just about
Let's no. Let's. I don't want to. It's too much of a waste of words.
At least it looks as though I'll have no trouble getting to bed tonight, at least. And when I wake up tomorrow, I think I'll have forgotten all about this. A few hours later, I had just returned from my second dose of Ambien and once again trying to write this report. This time I made sure to wait until my heart had slowed down a little so that I wouldn't have to spend half the night writing a confusing mess about my experiences last night. The result is far more coherent than it was before, but it still contains far too many digressions. So I'm going to cut most of it out entirely. Just keep in mind that I haven't actually said anything which would contradict what has gone before. Instead, you're seeing an expansion upon these themes with additional details which weren't necessary during my original sleepwalking session. But then, neither were they necessary for me to doze off on the bus ride back home, although admittedly those are the events which I recalled the clearest of all. After all, there's something very relaxing about a full day's work followed by a leisurely dinner out with your family, especially if the company is pleasant enough that it makes everyone feel like their best selves, i.e., themselves, without being influenced by the thoughts of others. Even if this isn't exactly how things really went down, it felt like it did. In any case, afterwards it took only 5 minutes to walk over to my car and drive home. My wife and children waved good night to me as I got ready to go inside. But I simply smiled at them in response and walked up to our door rather quickly in order to avoid any chance encounters which might complicate matters further. As soon as I closed the front door behind me, I stripped down completely naked in order to change into my pajamas. But of course, since I had been working all day long, this wasn't a difficult task to perform. It may have taken longer than usual, however, because it didn't seem worth it to rush. It'd be silly to put away all of the clothes I had worn today when we'll just have to get dressed again tomorrow anyway. And besides, taking care of these mundane tasks always makes me feel more relaxed afterward. Once I was changed, I made sure to lock the bedroom door firmly shut. Because even though nothing bad could happen now that my family was safely tucked in for the night, there was no guarantee that everything would stay that way once I stepped out onto the street in search of my nightcap. The darkness outside seemed so inviting that I almost considered leaving my house entirely. But then I realized that there would probably still be people out tonight who weren't afraid of the dark or who enjoyed it. Perhaps, and they might notice if someone were wandering around their neighborhood unclothed, especially if they happened to know him personally. So I settled on going upstairs and sleeping in the guest room instead. After all, nobody would find fault with this if they knew why I was doing it. And this time I wouldn't wake up until morning with absolutely no idea how or where I had gotten here. The guest bed is nice enough, but somehow lacks a certain warmth compared with what I'm used to at home. Perhaps that's because its sheets are newer than those at home. Or maybe it's because my pillow is less comfortable? I don't know. I've slept in plenty of beds, both at home and elsewhere, since I left home, and none of them have ever felt as good as the one back in my own childhood bedroom. This really isn't fair. The guest room isn't supposed to be as good as the master bedroom. After all, the reason you're using the guest room in the first place is so that you can avoid disturbing your loved ones.
We're done. We're done. We're done. Oh. All right.